Are we live? Are we live?
I think so. It's showing up like we're live. So we just kind of hope and pray most of the time that's actually working.
Good morning, Amrit. Already, we got everybody joining us this morning. Good morning to Wake Up and Deliver, Season 2, Episode 11. You know, it's funny. I remember just like yesterday was Episode 1. Time's just
It
going.
goes fast. I agree, man. It goes super fast.
On that topic, I need coffee, but we need some brain food to start us off. Let's get going. Every time you're tempted to slack off or do or be a little less than you could, remember that you are a person of integrity who lives by the simple creed. Do what you said you would do when you said you would do it the way you said you would do it.
I live this, man. I constantly, probably my biggest pet peeve is just like do what you say. Like, and people not doing what they say. So I like that one a lot.
And doing it the way you said you would do it, not just doing it.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. I guess that, there's always like an inferred kind of quality assumption, like when you're doing it or whatever. But yeah, I agree. It's like, hey, remodel my house, and then you kind of have a certain expectation. You don't really want it to be a lot worse than what you either talked about or what you inferred from your first conversations or whatever.
Yeah, you get a pool house instead of a house in the end. Like, what's going on here? What's going on? Lots of things going on. Craziness in the marketplace, ups and downs and up. Every little, I don't know, stock market, I don't even knows what's happening anymore. They're just like, just let it roll. We lose some, we win some.
Well, the stock market, unfortunately, like is just really devolved from like what it should be. I mean, it's now just pure like not like I won't say gambling, because it's not like these companies are going out of town, like are out of business per se or whatever, but like everyone's trying to invest tons of money. Like these big firms and hedge funds or whatever are investing all kinds of money. They want to see a couple of points, they sell stuff off, they're just moving money back and forth. So it's this constant like shell game of just trying to flip your dollars and stuff like that, which is why unfortunately like these big funds, like everyone who's got all the money that can benefit from those small shifts keeps making tons of money. And then the people like on like Robinhood and things like that, they keep chasing or whatever, just feed their money into these losing causes. One of the favorite things I love seeing is like, if you've ever seen on Reddit this subreddit called Wall Street Bets, and it's wild because people speak very openly about what they're doing and stuff like that. And of course you see these like outlier success stories, but the amount of people that
Lose.
lose, and I mean, I would
And
have to
lose
believe it's,
horribly.
yeah, like I have to believe it's like some level of financial devastation is unbelievable.
On that topic, the middle mile, the last mile, the first mile of all logistics, warehousing, everything is up in arms in that because it's a consequence. That's the logistics supply chain is shifting. It's causing a lot of chaos. I know lately, in at least in domestic Canadian terms, a few weeks ago from Toronto to Calgary, it was maybe called $7,000. Now it's like 15,000. We've doubled the price of transportation going across Canada domestically because there's such an influx. Companies going under all across as the reshaping of all this freight. Because if you're really dependent on aluminum, if you're really dependent on car parts, if you're really dependent on all these other things, and all of a sudden companies are going to be shredding those contracts right away, it's affecting you, and we're seeing a lot of volatility in the supply chain, and a lot of people are not succeeding in these trying times. So it's good to kind of focus on those niches that John and I have always talked about. Don't just be a one pony show with I can just pick up and deliver and be on time. Like, this is the time to really narrow your focus and not just do what you've always been doing.
Well, and I think too, I think the sort of like the beat of the drum for pretty much everyone that you see in logistics is going to talk about like relationships and stuff like that. And of course those are important, and they matter, and you don't want to be transactional, and you want to be relational and have those sort of like deep connections. That said, though, you can't over index or over invest in them, right? Like look at Jack Cooper and how quickly they went out of business, for example, because Ford and GM essentially, well, like it was really Ford, and then GM was kind of like, well, we're not gonna like just carry you either. They went from being like this massive, super reliable, top tier, automotive transporter to out of business in like a year, not even.
Yep.
And that was all relationships. They had done that business for 30 years or whatever it was, and they felt probably ultra secure in what they were doing, and it ended just like that. Um, I think every company, whether in Canada or the US or whatever, especially in the logistics space, right? So whether you're in warehousing, middle mile, last mile, whatever, unfortunately, I think that there's like a lot of carnage that's going to be coming because, as all of this price uncertainty goes into the market, as prices are likely going to go up, or people are going to be fighting to maintain cost controls, right? And deal with these things in the stock market about having to still show year over year growth and results and performance and things like that. Everyone's going to come looking for cost reductions, and going to expect you to sharpen that pencil. And a lot of the time I don't think it's there. So I think a lot of people are going to get into some bad positions.
I got to point out two very important things. First of all, it's St. Patrick's Day. I'm wearing green. John isn't. So
It is. Wow.
fighting Irish. Uh, Second thing, I got a
I'll
great
go,
story
I'll
on
go
that.
change after.
I got a great story on that aspect too. About integrity and about those relationships, how fickle they can be very quickly. Had a challenging time. Personal story, had a challenging time with a customer. Customer says, "Hey, can you do X, Y, Z?" We listed out the reasons of the parameters that how we could do it. When it came to it, there was a delay at shipping, and the customer says, "Well, why did the driver turn on his log while he's loading? Like that is the reason you're late." And I said, "Well, we have to abide by the laws, and this is what we had to do." And he goes, "Well, everybody else just turns off their logs and make sure that they deliver on time." And that integrity piece, that's where a lot of people might be willing to bend. And what I'm saying is, don't bend your integrity, because those little small decisions, you might lose that customer because they're not satisfied with you delivering. But had you gotten into an accident, had you something else has happened, they're not the ones to blame at that point. It's you're going to be losing your whole business. So don't be cutting those corners to retain those customers that are putting you in a position that's unfavorable for you. Always adhere to your integrity level of your standards, and don't bend because of those extra few dollars. Apologize, do what you can, try to retain the relationship. But if that's what the customer's pushing you to do, you gotta keep that integrity, because in these times you don't want to be pushed into those scenarios where you're constantly bending your own rules and safeties, because that's going to put you in more of a position, because everybody's looking for an excuse. Even if you go into the US side, inspections scales are really checking over Canadian truckers to make sure everything's by the book. They're checking over everybody's books to be more secure on that aspect of it. Is my little tidbit on that topic. I know it went a little bit, segued a little bit that way, John, but
No, that's good. I agree, man. I think a lot of people like are gonna make decisions and choices that they think are for the greater good, and I agree. I think it's bad, and once you start going down that road, it can get really messy. Not to mention, like when you talk about on the integrity side, it's like even if that customer asks you to do something like that, and they're just very legitimate, let's call it, in their request, you do it, like you're still not going to get away from the fact that now, even for that customer, you've shown them that you're willing to compromise in areas that you shouldn't compromise. So what does that say for down the road? What seeds does that plant in their mind? Now, granted, someone asking you to do that is probably got their own kind of shady frameworks, but I still think it's one of those things that where you don't want to open yourself up to that kind of Pandora's box, in my opinion.
And on that topic, when you are a final mile delivery person and you're signing up and you don't have your own bag, but you should have your own bag, you might not get a job with our next video. Is that correct, John? Am I introducing that video correctly for us?
That was pretty good considering that was off the cuff. So I'll give it to you. Yeah.
John picked the video today, so I'm excited for this one. I'm not sure if the audio is going to work as always, but we have. I'll let John take over.
Well, okay, so yeah, so the audio is not working. So this is kind of interesting. This guy who's actually filming, not the guy in front. The guy who's filming posts a lot of his trials and tribulations of being a Deliveroo worker in the UK. And that guy was asking him for a picture of his bag, and you kind of don't understand why, but he's going to get into it in a second. And what he basically is saying is that when you're doing the application to become a driver, you have to show them that you already have a bag, so that you were either a Deliveroo driver at some point in the past, or that you acquired one, or at minimum that you already have one that he says is unbranded. His interesting feedback, and which is different than what you would read on the Deliveroo website, for example, is that if you have a different company's branded bag, they'll just deny your application, which is why this guy was asking for it. So kind of like to your point, you know, the like organizations trying to set up all kinds of different ways to gatekeep and whatever. The unsaid implication is that, you know, Deliveroo actively rejects people if they don't believe that maybe they're going to be primarily committed to their platform, which I guess having another company's branded bag already would seem to imply that, you know, they've already been working for a certain period of time. And the reason why that's becoming more important with these gig platforms is because more and more of them are trying to gamify and segment and find like the better drivers, keep them on for a period of time, manage the newer ones. You know, they sort of incentivize becoming, you know, staying longer on the app, doing more deliveries, like, you know, essentially giving them more capacity that they can count on versus just having, you know, X tens of thousands of people that just jump from app to app and are constantly only looking for the best deals, because that's becoming more of a challenge when you want to be able to promise anything to everyone at any time, is that, you know, you're not going to be able to pay premium top price surge for all of those orders.
But doesn't that make them dependent contractors versus independent contractors, which then opens them up for, you know, should they have other benefits? Should they have other securities and whatnot? Like, I think it's a very steady slope. You gotta be careful not to go over, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where, you know, these gig workers come back like, well, I can't work anywhere else. He's not letting me work anywhere else because I have a bag. I'm dependent on these guys now. So now that might increase their costs that they don't see. Unforeseen circumstances on small decisions, right?
Well, this is becoming one of the biggest issues, right, around all of these models, is that they're all kind of struggling, right? So, you know, they're trying to, you know, build density, and they're trying to build sort of more efficient operations, which is causing them to behave, you know, in I'll say a more traditional sense. But I mean, like, there's a reason a lot of this stuff in logistics is kind of tried and true, is because, you know, it does actually matter. So, you know, outside of your crazy peak times, or outside of those like holiday periods or whatever, to sustain that offer, they're having to find people that, you know, commit to either longer periods of time, that, you know, are kind of like more consistent on the app, that deliver a certain quality level. Because again, like, that quality of the delivery speaks to the customer experience, and the customer experience being good directly correlates to how often or how frequently they're going to use the app. So it does become a challenge because they can't set the rates. They can't set the like, they can't choose who they're working for, so to speak. Like, they can't say, I'm only working for certain restaurants, I'm only working for certain customers, or whatever. They're out of control when it comes to directly interacting with the customer for any additional revenue or service or anything like that. So they are becoming very gated in terms of what they can do. Like, I mean, the only thing that's really kind of keeping this at bay right now is that there's no expectation for when you work, like either technically how long or how many days. But as these platforms continue to gamify and try to get people stickier onto the apps, I think that there is a real gray zone about where that's going to become even more of an issue. And pretty much all these platforms fall down the second those people would become employees.
Because there isn't a single final mile yet that is very profitable, or at least profitable at that final mile aspect, is there? Like, even Uber has a challenging time with it, like Uber Eats and all these other platforms.
No, like Uber and DoorDash are, well, I guess it depends on what you're doing, because like a lot of them now, for example, are kind of treating their business in the same way Amazon does, right? Is that they don't necessarily just try to feed off one, like they're not separate business units in the sense of like make or break. And before someone tells me yes, they are, like I know they do track them separately, and you do have Uber like sort of versus Uber Eats and Uber Freight and all that, but they really kind of look at it more in aggregate, and they start to layer in other types of things like their advertising platform, for example, and different types of activity or blending, right? Like Uber rides and Uber Eats, like you can now be a driver that's just kind of flowing between the two back and forth. So there's a little bit of muddiness there, but yeah, like in themselves, the actual profitability is not coming from the delivery or the physical component. It's kind of like
the other layers
the merchant fees, the commission fees, like the ad spend, like, so it's like it in itself, the delivery like is not profitable.
What I'm getting at is it's very hard for a new final mile company to get into it because they don't have those extra layers. They're very price driven, and if Uber Eats or Uber Freight has it at a far lower rate and they're trying to compete with that, they can because they don't have those other layers to make it profitable for themselves. Where let's say the cost to deliver to my place is $20. Uber offers it at $12 because they have all that other layer. Someone new coming in has to do it at $21, so they'll never be able to penetrate it within the market.
Yeah, I agree, which is actually why I think some of these really regional and small last mile carriers, like, if you're a business using them, I think you should always be prepared for the fact that these guys could shut down pretty quickly. Unless they're charging a rate that, for example, legitimately seems like it's paying for what you're asking, right? And most of the time it's not.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
John, you had some other ideas, conversations today. You were the MC of the mornings. You sent me a whole bunch yesterday. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't read through all of them, but you had a whole bunch of ideas that we wanted to chat about today. What was the other one? Here, let me pull it up.
See, now you're like pushing, because I don't remember what the other one was off the bat. But hold on. This is the beauty of technology. We're just gonna go to
Deep Sync. We were talking about Deep Sync.
Oh yeah. Okay. So there was the deep sync stuff, and then there was also the article I sent you from Forbes about Amazon. So before we get into some potential AI stuff, I thought this was funny. So I shouldn't say funny, because that actually probably offends people. I think it's more ironic than anything. I think it's more ironic than anything else. So there's obviously a lot of labor pressure and stuff like that in Amazon in the US. And around the world, but obviously the stuff in the US with like constant attempts at unionizing different sites, different parts of the business, whether it's like delivery activity or warehouse activity or whatever. So there was a recent boycott going on that was from like the 7th to the 15th or something like that. It was like a week-long boycott of like let's boycott Amazon or whatever. And unfortunately, they're basically saying did nothing, and sales actually look like they increased. Right now, that could be a little bit just because of the fact that, the previous week was like, lighter or whatever, or the trending for the last couple of 48 weeks was lighter. And it just so happened, that sales went up. But even at best, like if you say that it was flat, and I just think that that's also showing a real tension when we're talking about some of these issues, right? In the market, is that everyone is going to be trying to deal with these cost increases. Everybody is looking for, ways to sort of offset tariffs and stuff like that. And Walmart even got their hand slapped by the Chinese government a little bit for publishing news that they had successfully renegotiated with their suppliers, right? Saying that like they're not going to be on the backbone of all these cost increases, and just lowering prices even more so that, everything stays the same and these tariffs and things like that go through, quote unquote, successfully. But I think it highlights the fact that, where's all this going to come from, right? Like on the one side, we have systems that are built essentially on essentially low cost labor or minimum wage labor. You've got people feeling that these services need to be compensated better. You've got consumers, like end of the line customers who clearly aren't willing to pay for it. You have businesses that aren't looking to pay for it. So like this cost pressure in logistics is going to get real for a lot of businesses. And I just don't know how a lot of people, for the way that they look at their operations, operational excellence, operational execution, all of these things, are going to be able to deal with these and still stay healthy.
I read an interesting aspect on this perception of just China and the rest of the world from a Canadian American point of view. And I think most Canadians and most Americans, when they think of Chinese labor, they really see in their minds what was in the 90s and the early 2000s of, the quote unquote sweatshops that were operating and low labor. And that's how they're able to get all this manufacturing. They are even in Europe, they are so far further ahead past that now. It's a lot of it is automated. They have dark facilities that dark automated facilities where there's not a single person that works in there, and that's how they're able to get this economic output so much more than just cheap labor. And us calling it cheap labor all the time is actually hindering us from benefiting it, because we just think, oh, we need to pay our people less, and that's how we can compete. But it has nothing to do with that to that effect anymore. The same as Europeans, like when we have people coming from other places, and we're like, well, here is the benefits of working in the Canadian and American workforce. What experience do you have in Canada and the United States? And then they're like, well, we're light years ahead of what you guys are doing in these scenarios, like whether it's medicine, whether it's deliveries and an aspect. How is your experience better than ours? And we're hindering our own development by thinking we're the gatekeepers of the best still, and not accepting others into that category of being able to lift our advancement forward. I don't know if that made sense, but I think I got you on that, John.
Yeah. I do agree that I think that there probably is a misconception about people realizing that, that how much technology and stuff is actually involved in a lot of these processes, right? And they were able to do that because you're right, like a lot of manual labor. Now, that said, a lot of the Asian countries, Southeast Asia, around China, India, for example, look, whenever you do need to use people, labor rates are generally lower. But I mean, everything essentially becomes in line with like cost of living, and I think that that's what a lot of people don't understand. What I think is wild is that we've somehow allowed ourselves to be convinced that what we have over here is better. I saw this video the other day, random. Actually, it was funny. It popped up after something you sent me, and when I closed it, it was the next thing that came up. But it was essentially someone in I'm going to say it was like Zambia or something like that, and they were showing these essentially Airbnbs that they built for tourism and stuff like that. Dude, these places were gorgeous. Like the finishing, the quality of the workmanship, like the materials, like you could see the tile, you could see the granite type stuff or the quartz, you could see how everything was designed. That whole property to buy, $240,000, right? And we allow ourselves to believe that oh, well, because you're in Canada or because you're in the US or you're in some of these other countries, that it's normal that you should be paying $1 million, 1.2, 1.5, $2 million for these homes because, quote unquote, it's better. Yep. And it really just creates these challenges. It's really the fact that like people have turned it into like a making money machine, right? And the valuation and the value of these houses is just because of the fact that people keep investing and selling, investing and selling. And just like retail and whatever, it only works when it keeps going up. But what happens when you can't keep essentially selling more, or that price eventually has to like cap?
Or there's a tariff on softwood lumber and you can't build it for the same price anymore.
Yeah. Well, can't build it for the same price, but it's more that because you can't build it for the same price, you don't have the same margins, right? At the end of the day.
Or you don't have the same supply chain now supplying you because they don't have the equipment to do the same work. And, it's not set up. It's not as easy as a switch to all of a sudden go from one to the other very quickly. And same as in domestic Canadian terms, like we don't have the ability to just switch over and quickly build. That's where we're struggling with a lot of different things. And on that, even I think that perception piece is important because even when I think of, when you think of Iraq, you're like, oh, you're thinking of the Iraq war, everything is devastated. But if you look at recent pictures of Iraq, they've really modernized. They have a lot of manufacturing that they're building there. They have a lot of new infrastructure that has been built there that's now supplying the world as well. But we don't talk about that anymore either, right? Because it's kind of
Well,
like everybody just thinks it's
sorry, just
stolen in rumbles, in rubble.
just random. Funny enough, that okay, this is actually kind of creepy that you brought up Iraq, because I was going to send you a video about this like mega sort of like port project that they're looking into pretty heavily. And there's some obviously regional turmoil and some challenges about potentially getting it like really going and stuff like that. But they're legitimately looking at trying to create an alternative to the Suez Canal or whatever like that.
Yep.
Is just causing all kinds of challenges right now. And they were then going to build 2,000 kilometers of road and rail and all kinds of stuff to really move stuff into Turkey. And it was actually really interesting. So just to highlight your point about like, parts of the world where people have a certain perception, and it's like all of a sudden it could be your next big logistics hub example.
Your next biggest market that you have a niche for, and not just you're focused on that one aspect of it, right? And there's a lot of opportunity in anything that you have to just be able to pivot and be able to figure out how to do, and figure out a different way to reduce those challenges that are coming forth. That's what makes supply chains so nimble, if they are, and resilient if you're able to accommodate these things that are happening and you're able to grasp them before the next person. That's how you move forward, right? Yeah, that's a good segue, John. I think it's a
Okay.
fantastic segue.
And then
The next one you had.
Yeah, the next one. So we'll expand that as we finish off to kind of like highlight this concept of people's perception and stuff like that, and maybe not thinking about certain these things as a type of risk, and shifting over towards now tech, right? I don't like bringing up the tech stuff all the time because it's honestly overplayed and too many people talk about it. But there was some happening that came up in the news, right? Where some happenings, yeah. So where the Chinese government has now conferred, gifted, classified, I don't know what the process is, knighted maybe, DeepSeek as a national treasure. Now, well, that sounds like really prestigious and stuff, and maybe it is, I don't know. It also comes with some drawbacks, like some head people over at that company have had to give up their passports. There's limitations on travel. Different firms have been told like don't touch DeepSeek talent, blah blah blah, all kinds of crazy things. But I think more importantly is kind of the connection to any of these AI platforms, and this kind of like very quick war/cold war that's brewing. Like just last week and a half ago, Sam Altman or whatever of OpenAI was actively lobbying to try to get DeepSeek banned, right? Because of its performance and citing like national security concerns and stuff like that. But the thought, I guess, to leave with everyone is like all of these apps and supply chain tools and all of these different platforms that you're being presented, anything that really is claiming like AI or is leveraging some type of AI, like I've said this before in my newsletter, like the cost to develop this stuff is not realistic. Like none of these little startups have made their own models. At best they've got a bit of a tweak of an algorithm, they've developed kind of a logic flow or something. But if they're using a back end, whether it's to DeepSeek, whether it's to Qwen, whether it's to OpenAI, whether it's to Anthropic, to Google, it doesn't matter. The point being is that what happens to your business, or what could potentially happen when the walls go up and it's like, well, no, now you have to dive in even deeper, or you commit really hard to just that one provider. Your data is going in there, your team is just using it to analyze stuff, they've stopped asking questions, and you become very reliant on this one service. It's like, well, what happens then? It was great to maybe cut people or not invest or not develop your talent, but what happens when all of a sudden, like, you don't have the people anymore that even understand why you were asking the certain questions in the first place, or why you were analyzing data in a certain way, and you just left it to the magic box and you don't know what to do now all of a sudden when different restrictions go in or whatever.
You and I have mentioned this a bit before too. It reminds me of the movie The Idiocracy, right? Like all of a sudden we just don't know why we do certain things, and we're going to start pouring Coca-Cola instead of water on the grass because that's what we're told to do, and that's the better way of doing something, because we don't have that ability to analyze or think about what we're doing anymore. And what the reason why? Because we don't have that ground level. Because if we get rid of all these ground level workers, that's the training ground for everybody to move up to that supervisor, to that manager, to that
Mhm.
director. If you get rid of that middle and you get rid of that top, how do people get into that other aspect? Now, if they're using all these AIs in school to be able to jump and get a good degree, but they don't have the thought to be able to run it, and they keep using this tool, again, if heaven forbid everything falls apart on the tech side, you have nobody to know understand how to do anything. You know what I mean? There's no way
Yeah.
of moving anything or doing anything. It's just a house of cards at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Like I saw a great post from someone in my network about some different AI assisted coding tools, right? Like there's three really big ones right now, like Cursor, Replit, and Lovable, that are all catching like a lot of attention. And they do work really well. And his position was that like, oh, like non-technical founders and startups like is the future. And I agree with them 100%. And you and I have talked like at length about the fact that the real value of AI is by enabling capability and not just being a cheap answer set or something like that. So I do agree with them that way. The only thing that I think is a bit of a like a double-edged sword is that how do you actually also continue to develop people to ask the right type of questions, and how do you get them to understand like what they should be recording, shouldn't be recording? And if all you do is lean into these like apps that keep regurgitating the same type of information, how unique do your products be? How unique is your offer when it kind of uses the same framework for the next 1,000 apps or the next 500 ways or 10,000 ways, whatever it could be, that it records
Where is the
data and uses
creativity?
that data? Yeah, exactly. So I think that it's unfortunately going to create even more and more of a divide because of the fact that like there's going to be fewer and fewer people that ask these types of questions. And I know like even in that person's circumstance that like they've done some really amazing things and really great things. I give them nothing but credit. I also know for a fact though that they missed certain types of things about like where they should be tracking data, how they should be tracking it, at what level of accuracy, that would have been fundamentally better to do right from the start. Now you can always go back and fix things and rebuild and whatever, but I mean, small mistakes versus big mistakes, right? Jeff Bezos always talks about these doors that you can one-way doors and things like that, and I think you can always go back, but it's like you don't necessarily to try to rebuild something that you've already built right from the start because you've had some bad design from the first place. I think could probably break a lot of companies, especially in those earlier years. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I was going to say something else, but then I looked at the time, and then I said I don't want to segue into something deeper. So on that topic, being respectful of everybody's time and being the good hosts we are. Final thoughts, John, beyond what you just said?
No, I don't know. I'm gonna just relax. Waiting for some more news as we come up in the next couple of weeks to see what's happening in the U.S. and stuff like that. And again, really trying to focus with a few different clients on tightening up sort of data operations execution, because I think that anyone that is still got gaps in their system is going to start to feel a lot of pain in the next few months.
And you're seeing a lot of that in the system now. A lot of people are feeling the pain because they have a lot of gaps and they're trying to figure it out. And they're just going to their chat GPT and going, what are my gaps?
Give me the answer.
Give me the answer. Or you could always look to John.
Or Matt.
Or Matt. Or
Matt. Oh, see, like we're backwards. I always forget we're like mirrored.
We are. You can look to Monarch Connected Operational Innovations for your next logistical inquiry. As always, please join us next week on Monday morning for another Wake Up and Deliver. John and Matt will always refrain from booking meetings from 9 to 9:30. We'll always be here. On that note, thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Bye.